and we are delighted to welcome you to Carmelite House, which is the headquarters of Hachette UK and home of many producers of food books, including Headline Hodder, Yellow Kite, Orion, Kyle, Hamlin, Mitchell Beasley, Connor and Octopus, and lots more, many of which proudly publish members of the Guild. Thank you for coming. Enjoy the evening. And Orlando, over to you.
First of all, Stephanie, thank you very much for having us. It's quite a venue, I think. And thank you everyone for coming. This workshop was born, and this is the first, out of the Facebook group. Anyone here a member of the Facebook forum? Oh, that's excellent attendance. Well, it was suggested as a workshop a few months ago, and we said, well, let's go ahead and do it. And the result is tonight, and we even asked what kind of people you would want on your panel, and so here we are. And the success of tonight's workshop has led us to put another couple in the calendar. So if you're the kind of person who likes to plan ahead, 1st of October we've got another blockbuster workshop which is called What's the Next Big Thing, which is about trends. And we've got one in November about how to write a recipe, which is going to be an amazing combination of veteran food writers and young whippersnappers pooling their secrets and maybe tearing each other apart. I don't know. But look forward to those. Now, for tonight, my objective personally tonight is that our session will be objective, realistic, helpful, positive, and useful for you. And I would like to think that you go out of that door with a competitive advantage over those people who aren't members of the Guild of Food Writers. I'm quite serious about that. I really mean that. So I'm going to ask our wonderful panelists to be completely honest with us. If it's bad news, I kind of think we ought to know it. If it's good news, let us celebrate it together. We've got 4 glittering names. We have Karen Barnes from many of you know her because she's a Guild member from Delicious Magazine. We have Olivia Walmsley from the Saturday Telegraph, the Weekend Telegraph. got there in the end, the Telegraph. Zoe Ross from United Agents and Stephanie Jackson from Octopus. So we have magazine publisher, newspaper publisher, agent and book publisher, which is what you demanded on the Facebook forum. You got it. So, we're going to keep this quite informal. It's kind of a Q&A session. We're going to talk. I invite our panelists to chip in while the first person is talking. But we're going to keep questions from the floor till afterwards. And I'm going to run this very strictly to time, tyrannically, so that you've got time, 20 minutes for questions, at which point you'll just have to leap out of your chairs to get those questions in. So I'm going to start with Karen, and I've been pre-prepared with a few questions for people, actually. So that you know, the ones that they definitely wanted to hear us. So, if you're Karen, if you're a new freelancer who you don't know, and they want to get noticed by you, how can they do this through an email, or do they actually need to send you a box of cookies or something like that?
Don't you mean gin?
Gin? Gin. That's more like it.
Please no gin. Well, I would say that the first thing to say to that question is it's really hard, and I know that that's the case because we do have so many emails all the time, and we're a really small team. So I see emails as a bit of a scourge, and it's really quite difficult if you get something from someone that you don't know or you've never met. Trying to get something to jump out at you is really difficult. So I would say one of the key things is just to make sure that the heading of your email is really clear. So
the header line.
The header line, the title of the email is really clear. But also I would say really just stop and think, what are you doing this for? Think about, why are you writing to this publication to me? What are you doing in terms of why are you offering the story that you're offering? And think about the people that you're communicating to. And most important of all, I would say read the magazine, because it's astonishing. It really astonishes me. And this is absolutely true. I don't know if the other panellists find the same thing, but I get an awful lot of emails that are I would describe as somebody having an idea for a story that they really want to write themselves, but they haven't actually looked at the magazine to see what we do. They don't look at our headlines or our cover lines. They don't look at the sort of stories that we write, and therefore immediately that turns me off, because I love my magazine, and I want the people who write for it to love it as well. And I also really care passionately about the readers of the magazine, and I want them to be happy. So those are the main motivations, I would say.
And you do, of course, get a guild discount on your subscriptions to your magazine. So I would strongly recommend you take that up, myself. Lauren, should they write to you, or should they write to someone on your team, and how would they know who to write to?
It really is to me or to our deputy editor, Susan Lowe. Susan and I together, Susan looks after all the travel features and also the commissioning of the main features, but together we do consider all the feature ideas that come in, and we bat them back and forth between us. But I think the main thing is to keep whatever you send, if you've never met the person you're writing to, keep it really short, and make sure that the heading of your email is absolutely the heading that you would want the piece to be, because that will catch somebody's eye. I don't know if you all agree. You just think, oh, that's a really interesting story. Then you read on and see a very brief synopsis, which bullet points are great, so you think yes, 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 and that might make you think, I might take a risk on this. I would also say that if you've never written for the magazine before, it would be really good to send 2 pieces of short copy. One, I would suggest, is something that is unedited, and one something that's published, because another thing that I have found in the past is that there can be a big difference between those 2 things, and so it would be that's really helpful, just because it gives a flavour. And at that point, if I'm interested, I will then forward it to the deputy editor, and we'll discuss it and say, is it worth taking a punt on this? Because my honest reply is that it's a risk. Because we are small and we don't have much time. So if we do commission something and it comes in and it's 4,000 words when it was meant to be 1,000, and it's not really checked and finished, and it's a week late, we don't have the time to sort it out. And then you have the angst of having to go back to somebody and say it's not quite right. So I would say all of those things are key.
Do you want pictures in the pitch?
No, pictures aren't necessary. I mean, I suppose if it was something that you were imagining was going to be a big picture story, it would be good to say you have pictures and offer to show them. But generally, if we are commissioning, it's quite rare for us to commission a big recipe story just off the cuff, because most of that is stuff that we work on ourselves. We work with chefs and food writers. We don't have much budget to commission out recipes. So if you're offering something that, say, has 6 recipes, that's going to involve a photo shoot that costs £2,500, and as well as the writer's fee. So bear all of those things in mind. It's really better to start pitching something small that's 1 page long.
Karen, you're overpaying your photographers.
There's no negotiation on that, I'm sorry to say.
Just finally, because we're moving on at the speed of knots here, this is another question that I was asked to ask. The monthly magazine schedules, there's this idea that we need to be pitching things a year ahead, or 6 months ahead, or 3 months ahead. What are the schedules? Does that matter that much, or do you want the pitch to be for 6 months ahead?
It really depends on what it is. So if it's travel, we've usually planned our travel a whole year ahead, because we like to have things. We like people to write about places they really know, preferably somebody who's lived there at some point. I'm not very keen on group press trip features, because I just think you all end up with exactly the same story, unless there's going to be a very key angle. But broader than that, if it's a general feature that can slot in any time, then it really doesn't matter, because we're about to plan our October issue, so that you know where we are in our schedules. June is about to print, but the ones in between, I've planned up to and including September, and all of that content is sorted. But it is also fluid, so if there was an amazing feature that came in, I might bump something out for something that's even better or more topical. Especially newsy things as well. If there's something really newsy that was very current, I could just take out something to put in another key element.
Now I'm going to end up with a question which I'm hoping to ask everyone, just a kind of reality check. How many opportunities for people who haven't written for you before would you give out per year? And then maybe how many people would want to, come to you saying they want to write?
I probably get unsolicited about, I would say, probably 100 pitches, maybe more than that per year, from people that I don't know. Yes, in terms of how many of those I commission, probably only about 5. But I do, one thing I do always do, and I know not everyone does this, but I do always go back to people and say why. I always give people a reason why it's not right, and sometimes if somebody's put a lot of effort that shows they've read the magazine, then I will give it more time. If somebody's written me something where it's quite clear they've spent no time in it at all, and it's something that's gone to 10 other people exactly the same, then I usually am quite blunt and say, I would suggest you read the magazine before you pitch your next story. Because, it's actually a bit insulting to me for somebody to do that. That's the blunt answer to that question.
Karen, thank you very much for being so frank and honest and incredibly helpful.
Honest.
It's really interesting. Now, Olivia, to move on to Olivia, to start with the question that I just asked Karen, how many people are writing to you, pitching to you per year, and what kind of uptake are you able to?
I don't actually get that many unsolicited emails. I think also because
You're going to from now on.
I'd say probably about half that. I'd say maybe 50, they're sporadic. I'd say I get more pitches from writers that I worked with in the past, who I have a relationship with generally. Yeah, not that many. And also I think we don't really have a masthead in the Telegraph, so I'm quite hard to find.
Yeah. Again, no longer.
Pictures in the front pages of the paper, front page of the magazine, so it's a lot easier to find out who you are and how to get hold of you.
If someone sends in an idea to you and they don't hear back, is it proper for them to chase you, or what would you like to happen? What conduct would you like from the person who's pitching to you?
Well, I try to respond to everyone, but there are occasions where things slip through the net, and absolutely do follow up.
By email or by phone, or?
Well, there's no point phoning.
No point.
I don't answer my phone because otherwise I'd spend the entire day on the phone, mainly to PRs actually.
Yeah.
So I just don't answer it.
And
Sorry, that's not true.
Are there any sorts of features that you're actively looking for, generally, or now, or ever?
I think as a newspaper, it's news-related features that we're always looking for on a daily basis. We try and get a couple of stories on the website every day, and then we've got 10 pieces a week across the different, Stella, Satmag, Saturday, Sunday. So anything.
So there's a lot more. You need a lot more than just the article in the magazine.
Yes, we're also looking for digital pieces. So anything that is topical, super topical, because if there's a news story in the morning, we'd like to get something on the site that day, if possible. And obviously, and then for the magazines they have a longer lead time. For the weekly sections, it's a week or so lead time. But newsy stuff is great if you've got an interesting angle or spin on something that everyone is talking about. And there are so many food and health stories around. If you've got a specific, original angle that you can bring to me and say, as Karen said, this is my take on today's news story, and this is why I should write the story. That's great. That's what I want.
How do you get to be one of those writers that who's, as it were, in the Olivia stable?
That's a difficult question. So I guess that lots of writers have been around for a while. People I've worked with in the past, people whose paths I cross, or people who I've seen, whose work I've seen in other publications, who I've thought, they're great, and if they email me, I'll be like, yes. Or I think and just trying. I have commissioned unsolicited stuff in the past. It's rare, but it does happen, like you said. But it's a subject line. It's an interesting, punchy subject line that gets you hooked.
When we asked you the best pitch you ever received, you actually sent us a real live pitch, which I don't know if you read that, by Sue Quinn, who did give us permission to publish her pitch. But I did check with her. I think she was very, very, very flattered. But I mean, that was a superb pitch.
Yeah.
But what Sue was one of your writers that you use anyway. How did you originally encounter Sue? Because of course she's a member of the guild.
How did I encounter Sue? I can't actually remember. You know, I think she might have been one of those people that pitched to me, and I didn't know her personally, but I recognised her byline.
Yeah.
She started doing lots of digital pieces when we started commissioning lots of stuff from the website, and actually that sometimes happens. Because our rates are less, we pay a bit less for the digital stuff. It's generally shorter. I might start off commissioning someone to do a shorter digital piece, and then if that works out, then we'll do a single page and then maybe a spread, and it sort of works like that.
Right. I mean, I hadn't really planned that we would talk particularly about money this evening, because I kind of think that these people pay what I trust that they pay their going rate, and they probably have a rate card. Do you have a set rate card, Olivia, that you expect to pay? So you
No.
you screw everyone down to the least that you think you can get away with, do you?
No. We have slightly different rates for digital pieces, for print pieces. The magazines have a different rate to us. We all have different budgets for the different sections, so it sort of depends on the section, really.
So can I say that you generally do the best you can for the writer?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I want to pay. I think we have to pay. I want to pay people. We have to pay people. Otherwise, we're sort of ruining it for everyone, aren't we?
Well, that sounds very useful. The path from digital to longer features sounds a brilliant way to, as it were, arrive. Is that true, Karen, with Delicious as well? Do you commission things for digital?
It's actually different for us because, annoyingly, and I really think this needs to change, we don't have a budget for our online features, and I feel very strongly that we should pay all the people who write for us. So therefore, I don't really commission things for online. And I was given a big budget at one point when we were relaunching our website last year to commission. I had a pot of money to commission some food writers to do certain stories, which I did, which was great. But ongoing, I find that I don't want not to pay people, and I find there are lots of people who are starting out, students and things who want to get into food writing, who are really keen to do things for nothing, stories about trips, weekends away or something like that. And very occasionally I wouldn't commission that, but very occasionally that might happen. But for the magazine, we always pay. The only people that we don't pay are if we have a big name chef who's giving us one recipe, that we wouldn't generally pay them. Or if it's a chef who's wanting to publicise their restaurant and it's a new restaurant, it's part of their publicity. But anybody who is a food writer writing recipes for us, we would always pay, which is why it's hard to do it, because we don't have a massive budget. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg vicious circle.
Yes.
2 cliches in one.
And Olivia, with the if it's a writer who you don't know and they're writing to you and they've done a great pitch and no doubt along the lines of Sue Quinn, if they've got like a good blog following or they've got something behind them like that, is that of interest to you?
Absolutely.
And awards, are those of interest to you? Do you like people to be award winning? We've got the Guild Awards coming up, so we might get a new crop.
It's very interesting. Yeah, absolutely. Anything that shows you've got experience and you know what you're doing is great. And also social following, if someone's got a huge social following, that works for us as well, because if they promote it through their social channels, it means extra eyes on our pieces.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great.
Excellent. Well, I'm quite kind of heartened by that, but we're still coming down to a relatively small number of opportunities for new people in the door, aren't we?
Yeah.
I think we're just going to have to accept that, would you say? And we haven't even started on books yet, have we?
But I agree, digital is a great way in, because it's a smaller investment for us. We pay £150 for a piece of about 750 words, which isn't great, but it's something. So it's a smaller investment for us, and it means we get to try out different people, and if it doesn't work out, then it's not the end of the world. Whereas obviously if you're paying someone £800,000 for a huge piece, for something that has to go on the cover of the food section or the cover of the Saturday section, if it doesn't work out, then it's a bit of a disaster.
Yeah.
Especially when you're on a tight deadline.
Yeah.
But so yeah, digital is definitely the way in.
And you discovered Stephen Harris, didn't you, a Guild member?
I don't know if I discovered him, but yeah, he did. I got him in to do a column for the Telegraph.
Was that through? Did he pitch to you, or did you?
No. We were looking for a new columnist, and a few names were discussed, and we were actually all the different.
Gosh, I'd like to have been at that discussion. Oh, can you imagine? They're toying with our futures.
And I was a big fan of his restaurant, and he had an interesting story, I thought. And so we had 4 writers, actually we actually went for 4 chefs, because we wanted a restaurant, someone with a restaurant background, because we thought it would bring something different, because Diana does our sort of home, you know, she's a sort of food writer, comes from a food writing background, and we thought someone with a restaurant background could bring a different feel to the columns. So we had 4 different writers, and we asked them all to submit a sample column of 600 words with an associated recipe, and Stephen's just blew us away. It was just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So yeah, it's with him.
Fantastic. And when people say they do pitch to you in the hope that you're going to be looking for another columnist soon, do you like them, as Karen does, to send something published and something unpublished, or?
No, I'd never really considered
not
unpublished, but I think that's a good idea. Yes,
Well,
sometimes things are very, very different.
That was actually suggested to me by Susan, our deputy editor, today, because she thought that was actually a really good way of doing it. I hadn't thought of it before, but I thought it was worth mentioning, because I think it could make a difference.
Yes, because sometimes people have sent a link to their website and you've seen their published work, and then they commission a piece and you're like, oh, it sort of feels like this is written by a different person. Which it might have been by the editor slightly, but then occasionally, that's not always the case at all.
So if we're sending gin to Karen, would you like the cookies, or would you like something else? Cookies, okay.
Cheese is always welcome.
Cheese is always welcome. Fantastic. Any other messages to people who pitch to you? Because this is your chance to either get more pitches or to damp them down.
No, I don't want to stamp them down. Actually, I just think with a newspaper, we need new. It's about news. It's about the feature section, it runs off the news, what's happening, what everyone's talking about, what are the hot topics of the day, and what you bring to that, and your quirky, different angle on it. Because obviously if it is a big talking point, everyone's going to be covering it. And we want, in the Telegraph, to do it in a different way that other people aren't doing. So it's thinking about drilling down into that news story or the big topic of the day and thinking of a different and interesting way to do it.
Fantastic. And just one final thing. If I send you a pitch and then nothing happens, or you say no thank you, then a month later I send you another pitch, more along the lines, I hope, but I still get it, nothing happens. I mean, is that like really embarrassing that I keep
not at all.
popping into your inbox?
No,
Would you promise that? Because I begin to feel that I was being stalked a bit. Or why is this person so determined to write for my newspaper? When
it's very flattering, isn't it? If someone is really keen on the publication, really wants to be in it, it's no bad thing. And actually, I've had people pitch me 10 times before I've commissioned. No,
and
before
then
I've finally
commissioned
a piece. So do keep trying.
I think that's a really heartening takeaway, because I'd be so crushed after a couple.
No, you've got to have an incredibly thick skin, haven't you?
Because I think that I've had, in fact today I had an email from somebody who has been writing to me for about 2 years, and I genuinely really want to commission her. It's hard to, because we have so much less content than you do. Actually getting the perfect balance every month is really difficult, so you only have that many opportunities, and I feel like I've turned her away so many times. I definitely will commission her eventually, and she's always so nice about it. She was I'm just reminding
you tonight, Karen.
Maybe just reminding you that I'm here and this is an idea, and I do appreciate that.
That's called a pity commission. When you're so worn down by someone that you say the only thing you can do is, for goodness sake, give them a feature. Olivia, thank you very much. That's absolutely fascinating. I continue to learn things every second here. I wish I'd known this many years ago. Now we're going to somersault into the world of book publishing now, and we're going to meet Zoe Ross, who we're enormously lucky to have here, strongly recommended by Stephanie as the live wire in the publishing industry. And my first question for you, Zoe, is that when you sent in your biography, your brief biography, you didn't actually mention food. Is that because you don't want food people to be pitching to you?
Do I not mention it at all?
You didn't mention it at all. No, we had foreign languages, we had psychology, we had
bio.
Gender identity, biography, we had all sorts of things, but no mention of food. No.
Well, I'm sorry, that was an oversight. I represent an eclectic range of people, so not just food writers. But no, that wasn't pointed. It's just part of what I do. And really, actually, I think I'm interested in identity and what food says about identity, so it ties in with my broader interests across other genres.
And so, why should people pitch to you for you to be their agent? Because I know that we would all love you to be our agent, but we can't all have you as our agent.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really important when you're looking for an agent to think about the sorts of books that you admire or that you would aspire to resemble in some way, and do some research and look at the kinds of agents that represent the kind of work that you like, or the kind of work you think you could build on and take further. And so if you like the look of my list, I mean, it goes to Karen's point about researching and reading the magazine. I think it's really important, if you're going to approach an agent, to demonstrate that you have engaged with their list and like the writers they represent, and see yourself as identifying and being part of their stable. So ask me to be your agent if you like the look of what I do, I suppose.
Yeah, because it's a real relation. It's an ongoing relationship being an agent.
Yeah,
with any luck,
absolutely.
isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's not one piece of work.
Exactly,
It
it's a
goes
different
on.
dynamic, yeah.
And how closely are you expecting to work with the writer to influence their work, or does that?
No, I mean, I love working really closely with writers. I mean, it varies. You know, I have about 40 people on my list, and some people are quiet for a long time, and some people I speak to every day. It really depends. But when we're involved in developing a proposal or talking about where they want to go with their writing, then I'm very involved, and that's a really thrilling part of it, actually, to build a pitch that we can then share with publishers. But ahead of that step, I think what's always encouraging is when someone approaches you is that they demonstrate they've also been enterprising and dynamic in beginning to build their profile, and demonstrate that they're alive to the dynamics of the industry a bit as well.
Do you mean by that social media and getting a following?
Well, I think social media can be a bit of it's a tricky one. I think unless you have a dramatically vast following. But I think showing that you're active, connected, networked, I think relationships are really crucial. So if you just come to me and say, I don't know, I love cooking with, for some reason I thought of bananas. I love making things with bananas. I don't have a profile, but I just love bananas. Can I talk to you about a book? No. But if you, I don't know, if you say, even if you were to say, I really admire so-and-so's writing and I've been following them for a long time, and these are things that I've been doing to try to break through, or I've decided to build my own supper club thing, or I've started my own profile, and even if the profile on Instagram is small, whatever it is, to show that you're trying to connect into something bigger.
Yeah, so they've done some work before they
Yeah,
come to you.
Yeah.
You're expecting them to lay the foundations for a book writing career, really?
I think so. Yeah, I think so, especially in food. I mean, it's different if, let's say, you're a debut novelist. I wouldn't expect you to have started a Twitter account, but I think it's so important in this industry. It's different.
That's really interesting. Sometimes I see a cookery book that I love, and then I see the name of the author. How do you find out who that person's agent is if it isn't in the acknowledgements, which sometimes it isn't?
Google. You could say so-and-so agent.
Who is the agent, and it'll come up that way.
Yeah. You can often, or I suppose if you can sort of, you can go down a bit of a rabbit hole and just do some broad research. So if you start with one agent, you look at their list and look at some food writers and think, oh, they're cool, I wonder who so-and-so, you can just, how you start going through a spider's web of connections on Google. Just spend a few hours browsing and picking up information about who represents who and who's published by who and etc.
And if someone comes to you and you think this isn't a great fit for me, do you ever say, oh, why don't you try my worst enemy down the street?
Yeah, I mean...
do you agents do that? Is that kind of
do.
agency behaviour?
We do. Yeah, and actually a lot of approaches that work or that come to me are through prior connections or prior relationships. So it was always more effective if you come to me and say, I mean, it's not always within your power to do this, but so-and-so recommended I talk to you, or I was talking to so-and-so and they, and they mentioned your name or whatever. That can help. Maybe even make it up can sometimes get you over the line.
You don't check then?
Sometimes I question it and then it comes out. It turns out it's a bit nebulous, but you can. I mean, yeah, we do. Colleagues do share often. I mean, I have a few clients that colleagues have passed my way and vice versa. So, absolutely, it works that way too.
How many of on your list of 40 people, which it seems a lot, but they're not, as you say, all active at the same time, or you'd go mad, I'm sure. How many of those are food authors, would you say?
I think about a quarter.
A quarter.
And within that, I've got restaurants, and then people who started supper clubs or pop-ups, and then increasingly sort of narrative food writers. I mean, something positive to say is that I think the appetite for narrative food writing is growing, in my experience, and that's
Does that mean
exciting.
memoir food writing? Memoir, and is that the same thing as memoir? Or
Yeah. I mean, so also
so
hybrids.
prose.
Yeah, exactly. So straight recipe books, I find I'm actually probably doing less of. I started out doing restaurant cookbooks, and that just feels really hard in the climate that we're in at the moment. Same goes for, I mean, there are certain trends that are really working, like veganism, as we all must be aware, where I would be keen to hear from people who are sort of very locked into what's happening, what the next big thing is. But otherwise, I'm also particularly interested in more narrative stuff. So I've got a client who's publishing a memoir in July, which has recipes at the end of each chapter, so there are other ways to, straight recipe book is not the only format to consider.
If someone came to you with an idea for a straight recipe book, and you thought that you don't want to do a straight recipe book, is the relationship such that you would encourage them into an area that you thought was better for you both, or is that really not an agent's job?
Yeah, potentially. It's the relationship, isn't it? So if someone writes you a really engaging, interesting, enticing email, which in its own way is a kind of a sales pitch that flatters you in some small way, and
That's true.
and
I agree.
Flatters you with the sense that they've taken the time to work out who you are. And actually, another thing I would say is not a bad idea to suggest a coffee rather than sending me a document, because I'm always happy to meet for breakfast or a coffee.
Really?
Yeah. Within
Do you
reason.
hear that? I would never in a million years have dreamed that an agent would meet me for a cup of coffee.
If
Maybe
your
there's
email
only one.
entices me, then I'd be very happy to meet and discuss what the best angles might be. It doesn't have to be that it's not the same as a magazine or newspaper pitch. It doesn't have to be a piece of writing, this is my sole idea. If there are things that are interesting about you and I want to explore, then that's good too.
Fantastic. And then I have to ask you this, because I've asked everyone, how many pitches out of the blue do you get per year, and what uptake is there? How many of those can you work with? You can't go on forever. You've got 40, you can't have 400.
Some people do. I mean, I get, across all genres of writing, at least 1 or 2 a day, like a lot of fiction submissions, so that's quite heavy going. Food, probably 10, actually, not a huge number of unsolicited per year.
10 per
Yeah, like
year.
1 a month, let's say, of something that comes out of the blue that's food related.
And would you expect to see in that classic old-fashioned publishing type proposal a synopsis and chapter or something?
Very rarely would I expect someone to come to me with a polished proposal. People tend to approach me just saying, hi, this is me, look at my profile, these are my ideas, and then I would talk to them about how to write a book proposal, and we'd go through that process together. So I wouldn't expect anything especially polished in terms of written material. The process with an agent is to prepare that, to take it to publishers.
What if someone did come to you with a proposal that
Sure,
was polished?
fine, great.
You wouldn't mind?
No, I'd love it.
You wouldn't feel they kind of undercut your...
I'd
your
probably
job?
find something to do on it anyway, just to make my mark, but I'd appreciate that. That'd be great. It doesn't often happen.
This is very surprising, isn't it? Is anyone else finding surprises? Under every stone we turn over, there's something extraordinary there. Well, thank you very much indeed, Zoe. That was most illuminating. And Stephanie.
I'm so nervous.
Oh, I'm sorry.
waiting.
I'm sorry. Poor
It's really
Stephanie had to go
tough
last.
crowd.
Karen asked to go first, but she said she'd like to go after Zoe. So this
I mean, I
cruel
defer to
order
the
arrived.
leadership.
I'm sorry.
Can I just say, before you question me, I'll let you do that in a minute, but I broadly endorse everything, all the wise words that have gone before me. I thought I would just start by sharing some market data for the first for the full year that we have, which is 2018. Okay, and this is the Nielsen book scan data, and for anyone who doesn't know, Nielsen is the company that compiles the bestseller list. So this is going to be like a little bit disappointing, okay? But I think the reason I want to share it with you is because I think it's helpful to know the state of the market and kind of who cares about what's happened in the past. Don't let what the past 2018, what happened then, define what you do in the future. But just be aware that it might explain some of the responses you've had from publishers and agents and so on along the way, and it just might help you put your thinking in the place of a publisher and help you define what you're going to look at for the future. So anyway.
So, and this is really classified information, isn't it?
This is top secret.
This is worth. This is actually worth an awful lot of money, which
hundreds of thousands of pounds. So, right. First of all, last week, the #1 nonfiction title last week was a cookbook, and that was Pinch of Nom. And last week alone, that sold 56,000 copies, okay, which is more than many of the books we've published and really love have sold in their lifetimes. So, I mean, that is an incredible. I'm sorry, this is UK. So this is UK Nielsen. So, you know, like that book or loathe it, that is amazing, right? And that is a cookbook at the top of nonfiction.
And I'll just chip in that we have asked the Pinch of Nom writer, one of the writers, who is a guild member, to do a workshop with us. Yeah. But she hasn't replied. She's too busy.
So, going back to 2018 for the full year. Okay, so for as long as I've been publishing cookbooks, which is probably like 12 years or something, food and drink has been the #1 category for Nielsen in nonfiction, and it's been really, really strong, and it's grown every year, which has been really fun for me because I love cookbooks. Really, really shocking news was that in 2018, for the first time in my memory, the food and drink market dropped. So it's always been #1, and now it's #2. So it dropped by 5%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but which is like literally millions of pounds. So it's bad news for books in 2018. Hey?
What's #1?
#1 is now biographies and autobiographies, and that's really because of 2 authors, Michelle Obama and Adam Kay, who wrote the amazing This Is Going to Hurt, you know, both incredibly worthy authors. So that's why that category has grown by 17%, whereas food and drink has dropped by 5%. I suspect that when it comes to the 2019 reckoning, given the incredible success of Pinch of Nom, which is the fastest selling cookbook of all time already, literally, that will probably bring, I mean, it could bring food and drink back up to #1, we'll see. Anyway, a couple other bits of detail in 2018. So despite the drop in food and drink, 2 categories in particular went up. First of all, vegetarian cookery, no surprise. For Nielsen purposes, that includes vegan. That was up overall by 59%, mostly accounted for by 3 authors or titles, Bosch, Deliciously Ella, and the roasting tin, the green roasting tin in particular. Also, 60% of that category for 2018 was vegan, okay? There were 472 new ISBNs, i.e. new individual books, in that category last year.
That's crazy.
And that is enormous. Despite that, it's still a small category, so there's tons of room for growth. The one other category that had growth was health diets and whole food, which kind of tends to overlap a bit with the vegan and veggie thing, only up by 2%. The category that dropped the most within food and drink, so those were all increases, the biggest single drop was international and regional food. And so that's a shame, because that is one of our favorite areas, actually. The thing to remember is it's all cyclical in the food and drink market, and I think probably part of the reason why it's dropped is because there has been an awful lot of publishing in recent years, because people like us and people like you write great books. We love to publish them. It's so much fun. We've gotten to a point where, you know, everyone has quite a few cookbooks. We're probably over-publishing as a genre, and so it's correcting itself slightly. So that's context.
Fantastic. Now, Stephanie, if someone has a book idea and they haven't had the good fortune to meet Zoe, can they send that idea straight to you? And do they? Do people?
So yes and no. So first of all, most big companies, and Octopus is sort of small, but we're part of a big organization, Hachette. And you'll probably find most imprints are part of a larger company. So Hachette UK, definitely Penguin, I'm not sure about anyone else, but Zoe would know, have policies that state we do not take submissions direct. However, if you happen to know me or like whoever the person is that you wish to target with your idea, just contact them anyway. Like, forget the rules, don't worry too much about it. Just get in. 62% of my current slate has come to me via agents. If an agent submits something and it's an agent I rate, and this is one of them, I will automatically look at that proposal, like whatever it is. And in fact, there was a book I published with one of your colleagues, Ariella Feiner, a few years back called Mamushka, written by Olivia Hercules. She sent this pitch in. I love Ariella, therefore I read it, but my heart sank because it was for a Ukrainian cookbook, and I thought, why would I publish a Ukrainian cookbook? Apologies to people who publish in this area. Of course, it turned out to be Olivia Hercules. It was amazing. I had to have, if that had come to me direct, I probably wouldn't have ever gone further because it came from an agent I trusted and respected. That validated, that effectively authenticated Olia's work, which is a little bit kind of unfair, but as these guys have said already, there's so much going on every day. It's so hard to get through everything. We want to read every proposal and give everyone a shot, but we're time poor as much as anything else. So make it really easy. And one of the ways you can make it easy is to sign with a hot agent. Otherwise, I would just endorse, what's been said already. Make it pithy, make it like a killer kind of line at the top. And make it easy for me to convince my board that we should invest money in creating the book, both to pay you and to pay for the photography and so on.
Yeah, that's very heartening to know that people can just come straight to you. I didn't imagine that was possible. What kind of, so the same sort of proposal as the magazine people have talked about, you would like, you don't need pictures, you don't you'd like a sense of energy.
And you know what, there is no standard format for proposals as far as I'm concerned. If it's a great idea, just today at lunchtime, I had lunch with a food writer. And I knew I was meeting for lunch, obviously, but I didn't know. In fact, he didn't have an idea. It emerged out of the conversation. So there is now this actually super cool thing that we're talking about doing. There's no proposal. At some point, we'll get to something that I can share with my colleagues, because there will be a day when I have to walk into what we call the publishing meeting. We have them every week. Where my CEO and the finance people and all the sales people and so on are sitting in a room, and I've got to pitch to them and get numbers that allow me to invest. So at some point I do need a proposal. It might be that the author or the agent has supplied that. It might be that I've kind of helped create it. It kind of doesn't matter. If you've got an idea that I can't live without, and I love you and I want to publish you, and for me it's a lot about heart, I am going to get it through that meeting.
Yeah.
So I kind of don't care too much about the detail of the pitch.
Would you ever recommend that someone who gives you a proposal gets an agent? And would you ever
I do that all the time.
get an agent and sort out this proposal and come back to me at some point?
Yes and no. There are from time to time there are people who I think where it's kind of not an idea that I would publish anyway, or I think they're kind of not quite ready, and I might say, suggest an agent. But if the person is of the right caliber and their kind of ideas are of the right caliber, then I'm happy to still talk. I don't have to, I love it when Zoe and her colleagues present me with something amazing that's fully formed, where all of the kind of commercial considerations have been worked. It is a gift, but actually I don't get enough viable proposals that way. Partly because, there are some things I might not like. There are some things I might not get because Zoe sells them to someone else for more money or whatever. So I can't just have the pick of everything that's presented. That means that I still have to publish books, to a value every year. So if they're not handed to me on a platter, I have to go out and find them.
Do you ever pass proposals on to another publisher?
Oh, sure.
And
Sometimes it depends. If I think it's viable, if I think it's
you have some practical
not
jokes in there.
viable. I mean, what often happens is someone will send a great idea, and there will be something quite similar, or an author who is somehow quite similar to that on our list already, and that is a case where I would say, look, this isn't right for me because I have, a book that's quite similar to that. Why don't you try so and so?
And something that happened to me not long ago was a book proposal that was very much liked, but then the marketing department said they wouldn't sell enough copies. Now, were they just being kind there, or does the marketing department really have the say over whether a book gets published or not?
Not in my book, but it is, and every company will do it slightly differently. But I don't know a single publisher, I don't know about you, for books, who has sole control over, the expenditure in the business. So, at some point up the chain, we're reporting to someone who's in charge of the money, and we're responsible for generating more wealth, both to pay whoever the overlords are, but also so that we can publish more books, and we want our authors to be successful, we want the books to be successful, then we can do more books. And at some point, everyone needs to buy in, right? So I can't solely say, it's not like Steph wants to do this book, therefore we're going to do what she says. I need to bring those people on board.
And if your company, and it wasn't your company, their marketing department has said that you can't sell enough copies to pay for it, and I don't want to publish a dud book any more than anyone else does, should I be taking it to other publishers to see if they can wangle the figures differently?
Have different criteria.
But wouldn't I believe you?
And different tastes also. I mean,
But if it's down to numbers, if it's down to marketing numbers, don't you have to trust someone like you that your numbers are accurate?
Everyone will have a different
Some people think they can sell more than.
And it's so much about personal belief and force of will, and and one's track record, whether it's my track record or that of the author. And are we going to decide that this is going to be a bestseller or whatever? Not that we can guarantee any of that. Of course, as you all know, no one knows if a book is going to work until it's already done, and we've already done all the work together, and it's out there. It's a crapshoot until that happens. With the best will in the world, some books don't work, and nobody knows until that happens. So it's a risky business.
And I'm going to end up with my little numbers quiz. How many pitches do you get out of the blue, and how many do you publish per year?
Well, I try to publish as few books as possible every year. Only because publishing a certain value of revenue every year. But what I want to do, I kind of don't care about that. What I want to do is I want to publish the books I really love, right? So last year, not enough of those came my way, and I only did half my budget. This year, we do our budget in a calendar year. I've already done my budget for the year. So I'm going home after this. No, I'm not. No, I'll probably double my budget this year, I would expect. It might be a dozen books a year, and of those, 3 or 4 might be debuts, potentially. I met yesterday with a really cool debut who we're publishing next spring, so.
When you say debut, there are, of course, seasoned food writers who might be thinking of making a comeback. What about that? I mean, that's not as juicy as a debut, is it?
It depends. There was a book I did a few years ago with somebody who'd been published basically by like everyone in town, right? She'd been around the block. Really cool person. I'm not going to name names. Anyway, she'd been around the block, and the thing that happened was that she had gotten a column in a national newspaper since whatever the last book was. It wasn't Olivia's paper. Anyway, and so what that meant was there was a major change to her platform, and that helped me tell a story. So when it comes to people who've sort of been out of the loop for a while coming back, there needs to be a reason. To your point earlier about narrative books, I would really endorse that. So at the end of this month, I'm publishing a book with Mark Hicks called Hooked. Mark obviously has done like 1 million cookbooks already over the years, over a quadrille. Wanted to do another book. I said, you can't do another cookbook. Like, you can't do that. You've done too many. Like, you know, you're kind of past that. You have to do something different. And so what he's done is a narrative piece that is about fishing. And yes, there are 1 or 2 recipes at the end of a chapter. This sounds familiar, doesn't it? So that kind of thing of, it's a book about food, but it is not, and there are some recipes, but it is not a cookbook. I see that as the growth area coming up, because generally speaking in the nonfiction market there is growth in narrative overall, so I think that's a great direction.
It's much easier for us to place something like that as well with a story. So Mark here tells a memoir, you know, his life in fish, or I don't know, that's ridiculous, but you know what I mean? It's something else. It's not just a recipe, it's a story and it's narrative.
Exactly.
So it works for everyone.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to have questions from the floor, but before we do that, can we just give a warm round of applause to our guests for being so generous with their knowledge. I've learned a heck of a lot. Now we've got a microphone. Have we got a microphone? Obviously my questioning was so thorough that there are no questions left, but I'm sure someone does have a question. I'm clean out of questions. Here.
The mic is coming round.
Who was first?
Here.
Oh yes, Sue Bailey. I'm very interested in this issue about narrative fiction, but fine if you're a well-known chef. But what if you're an unknown? How does the sort of food narrative element work there?
Yeah, why is anyone interested in your fishing stories? Is that what
Exactly.
Yeah.
That would then fall to, I think, the quality of your writing and the quality of your storytelling, and then that in fact it becomes less about profile, it becomes more about your capacity to tell a story and to weave food in, but that comes down to how good a writer you are, actually, I think.
Agreed.
And we had a question over here. Yeah, if you don't mind waiting for the microphone. If you just say who you are and then your question.
Hi, Ellen Manning. It's more for Karen and Olivia, really. Do you ever get moments, I always think that this is going to happen to me, but when you just want to say to someone, look, can you just give up because your ideas are all rubbish? And I don't know, I kind of always wonder if that's going to be. And have you ever had to do, or is there a nice way that you would do that, or should we just all kind of trust in this belief of I'll just keep on going and, you know, one day someone will commission me?
I would never tell somebody they were rubbish and to go away. I'm sure it depends on the person. I mean the commissioner. I feel like you should treat everybody with respect, and so that's the approach I take. Probably the thing that would happen in the end would be that I would just stop answering emails if it got really, really annoying.
So
but that hasn't really happened. I just wanted to add though I think it's really fascinating how the mention of narrative and story has come through so strongly this evening, because really that's the root of everything that we do on Delicious as well. It's all about heart and soul and being accessible to people, not being an elitist club. And I think we're in a world at the moment where there's so much that's uncertain, and food is this kind of rock, and people love relating to a story. And I think we have a regular feature called Tastes Like Home, which is where one person, and it often is a reader or a food writer who gets in touch, they have one story where it reminds them of home, and they just tell that story briefly and give the recipe, and that is such a warm moment. And I think it's just interesting to hear that books are going very much in that direction as well.
I think you've got an exceptionally warm, friendly feeling in the magazine, and that's probably why it's so successful, because you really do feel you're with a group of lovely people.
Well, that's what we aim to do, but I have to say we are in very tough times. I completely believe in quality print, but the last 4 or 5 months have been really, really hard on the newsstand, really difficult, just suddenly, and I don't know what's going on, but I feel like, you know, we have to keep doing what we believe in, but so you're always challenging yourself to think of what's the next thing that's going to get people to take notice.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that point. This is one of the reasons for me personally that we're looking at going into narrative now, because actually we all love what we're doing. We love working with really talented food writers and publishing in this subject area. And if the market is going down in kind of like the kind of obvious normal kind of treatments, recipe picture, what can we do that's different? Because people still want information, people still want to be seduced and try a new thing and read something interesting. How can we find another way to do it that's more viable if the market isn't really open to the standard fare? And that is one way of doing something different. So innovation is important.
And Olivia, you're also circulation dependent, although with so many wings going on, it must.
Well, I mean, we're having newspaper circulation, magazine circulation. It's not a happy picture.
But you've got the digital stuff going on as well, haven't you?
The Telegraph has a new strategy which is all about subscriptions now, digital subscriptions, which is good because it encourages quality digital publishing. Whereas a few years ago, I think lots of news organisations were going down a clickbait route because they thought that volume of page views would equate to advertising money, but it didn't work out like that. So now I think it's a good thing that the Telegraph is now pursuing this quality journalism online, which people are willing to pay for.
Fantastic,
Which
and
is
you're
good
willing
for
to pay
everyone,
for as well.
Exactly,
That's
and
great.
we can pay the writers, and everyone's happy.
Now it was actually. I think the earlier questions were. I'm wrong. Jenny.
Jenny Ridgewell, do you think food writers can earn a living wage from food writing, or do we have to diversify with going to doing food demonstrations, pop-up suppers? And if we have to diversify, what ideas have you got?
Anyone like to take that one on?
Well, you and I were saying earlier. I mean, I think because I thought I said to Orlando, what a great set of different types of disciplines on the panel. In my experience, most people who make their living in this area are doing a bunch of things, and I kind of think that is the way to do it and is very sound. So any opportunity you can exploit across the different types of revenue generators, do it. Also, just to I think Zoe's point earlier, well, everyone's probably, platform is so important. So I'm not going to sign anyone, and no one is going to, just because they have X number of followers on social media, or just because they've done a pop-up, or just because they have a blog. But I quite like to see, and we all do, that people are active in all of these different areas, and that they are visible in all those different areas. So even if it's a small thing, it might not be paying massive bills if you're doing a demo or whatever, but it's helpful from a commissioning point of view to know that you're doing that alongside everything else you're doing. So I would encourage you to take all the opportunities always.
That's very helpful, because it suggests that diversification isn't a desperate measure so much as
not
something
at
that
all.
is building up your career,
Yeah.
which is very heartening, because we all have to, earn
And
a
there are
living
so many
somehow, don't we?
facets to.
Yeah.
So the team who go into making a cookbook, there'll be food stylists, there'll be food photographers, there'll be people who also have fingers in lots of pies within the industry. So you meet those people, you will then create your potential book with, doing other things. It all comes out of those relationships again.
Another question? At the back there.
Is that on? Yes.
Yeah.
It's Claire Finney. This is quite quite a mundane question, but I have an acute anxiety about being irritating, and I was wondering, how often do you chase if you're sort of waiting to hear back from people? And I'm an editor part-time myself, so I know how stressful it can be and how difficult it is, so I don't want to be that person, But
Oh.
Email. And don't worry about it, I'm sure you're really not irritated at all. And I would say email and then wait a week. If the peg, if it's related to a very pressing news peg, which will go away the next day, then I think you can email the next morning and say, listen, do you want this? Because it's going to go off the boil. I think, so it sort of depends on what it's pegged to. If it's something that's going to go away, then you can be a little bit more irritating, but you're not.
Are you the same, Karen? Leave it a week or a little bit longer with the monthly schedules?
I would say for me, I would leave it, I would say a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and then chase once more, and that's probably enough just for that one particular story. But I would hope that you would have had a reply from me by that point. But I do have a lot of emails that I think, right, okay, these are things I need to address, and I haven't forgotten about them. They're there waiting to be done when an issue's gone to press, so I might just be waiting 2 to 3 weeks for a half a day where I think, right, blitz through.
Fantastic. Anna, back?
Hey, it's Anna Turner. This one's for Olivia, really. If something is quite pressing, what are your thoughts on sending a pitch to a few different editors at once if someone isn't replying?
Sorry, what was that?
What are your thoughts on sending one pitch to a few different people at once?
Oh yeah, that happens a lot actually.
Yeah. You're not offended?
No, and also there are so many different sections of the Telegraph. You've got Stella, Sat Mag, Saturday, Sunday, daily features, digital. So no, it's fine. We try and talk to each other. And I would always mention if you sent it to someone else.
And
I've
what
also
about different publications as well? So
okay. That's difficult because what if we both say yes? I would prefer.
Exactly. I usually wait.
Yeah.
Until I hear back and then go to
I think
someone else.
what I've noticed people doing is they'll pitch it to me and I'll assume it's just for me.
Yeah.
And then if they don't hear back from me, very quickly and they need to place it elsewhere, they usually just follow up with an email going, listen, I'm sending this elsewhere. Tell me to hold my horses if you're interested.
I think that's a very interesting question, and something I've learned tonight is that the identical pitch probably could not be sent anyway to 2 different publications, because they expect you to have read their publication rather closely shortly beforehand. Questions? Sean.
Hello, Charlotte Pike. I've certainly noticed my experience of book publishing has changed enormously over the last few years. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago it was what is your expertise, whereas now it is what is your social media following. Do you have any advice, obviously apart from developing a social media following, on actually increasing the chances of getting published, despite developing expertise and a really relevant story for selling something?
Well, the things that you've identified there are, finding your niche. I think that's really important. I think being aware of what else is out there and identifying both evidence that what you're doing, there's an appetite for what you're doing, and that there's a gap for what you're doing, if you see what I mean. So identifying where your story resonates with things that people are obviously enjoying buying, but also where you're doing something new or innovating again.
100% agree with everything Zoe says, always. The word I overuse is being distinctive, which is sort of naff, but like really, so think about, so please send some more vegan ideas, because believe it or not, there's still room to do vegan. And there are 1 or 2 publishing imprints in the world that haven't yet published a vegan book that do have a gap for that. But given that 472 ISBNs for vegan books happened in 2018, like, you need to just understand that, and then, somebody will have missed some opportunity, I'm sure. So, like, what is the thing that makes your book different and distinctive? It could be you personally, and something about you as an individual that makes it distinctive. It could be that you're doing some amazing narrative treatment, or like some other non-obvious form. It could be that it's just about bananas, whatever it is. So find that thing that makes it distinctive. I wouldn't sign anyone. I mean, there was a moment when we probably all signed people because they were on social media and above a certain number of followers or whatever. That does not consistently translate. So I actually, kind of violently do not care what your social media following is, but if you don't have a social media presence, then I really do care, and it makes me really angry. So you must have a presence if you want to be published, probably by any kind of national level publication or publisher. You don't necessarily have to be super active or have that many people, but show us that you are out there communicating. And part of it is that I just want to know that when your book is published, if somebody is searching for you in any way, shape, or form, they will be able to find you. So they can go to your Twitter feed, maybe you've never tweeted, but you actually have a Twitter place where the link to Amazon, or a picture of your book or like whatever can be there. So if somebody lands there, they can find you and they know that you have a book out. That's all I ask.
Stephanie, just following on from what Charlotte said, I had the impression in the past couple of years that very specialist titles have been successful. So if you kind of raise the sharp down to fermenting or vinegar or something which previously would have been thought very specific, is that still a trend, or is that?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So we still discovery, another kind of noun, bit of terminology, but that is still interesting and important. Bye. Good night. So I love being surprised. I mean, it's a bit like the Ukrainian book a few years ago, Mamushka. So who knew? Probably a lot of you did know that there was a really interesting food there. I didn't. Angela Clutton's amazing vinegar book. I mean, nobody has done a book about vinegar of that caliber at that kind of price point in a long time. I want to say ever, but probably someone knows differently. Anyway, so do something interesting, distinctive, surprising. That is exciting.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Fantastic. And
Hi, Dahe West. Another book publishing question. If you are previously published and it wasn't a #1 bestseller, you're not Pinch of Nom, for example, would it put you off publishing their second book?
Not necessarily. No, not at all. So somebody who's previously published elsewhere, you mean?
Or even with you.
Oh yeah. I mean, how many people can be #1? Like hardly anyone. I mean, it's the dream to hit the top 10. Of course, lots of debuts, hope to hit the bestseller lists, and so few of them do. But how many books are published every week and every year? I mean, huge numbers. So being a bestseller is not important. If somebody is already published, I mean, once I am your publisher, then I have an interest in you for the rest of your life. And if there's something we can do, then I will want to find a way to do it. And if we found that there is a market who responds to your books, then and we can keep working together, that's brilliant. But if you're published somewhere else and you want to jump ship, I mean, then it goes back to that point I made about this female food writer who I published a few years ago, who'd been around the block at the other publishers. The thing that made it possible for me, because it is a little bit of a problem when we're trying to explain to, say, Waterstones, why someone has changed publisher. Like, retailers kind of don't get it, and makes them nervous. So what we need is a really good story. And if something has changed about, you and your platform and what you're doing, or if you've gone in a new direction, or if you've changed from doing standard cookery books to narrative, or like whatever it is, if there's a big change, that can be a good enough reason.
Yeah, I would agree that you need to have a story that gives it a good spin, because as an agent, I do always feel really anxious about less than wonderful sales track. It really does inhibit your chances, I find, unfortunately. So
I mean, the sad reality is when book publishers go into that meeting, the very first thing is, so when you've pitched to me, and then I've got to pitch it to my colleagues, because I love the idea, right? I go in, Cara compiles all of the book scan for everything you've ever published, and then every possible piece of competition for the lifetime sales and the moving annual total for the last 12 months. So, sometimes it looks, I want to use a swear word, but I won't, because it's such a polite audience. Sometimes it looks really bad. And sometimes that is enough to stop the opportunity, sadly. Sometimes it doesn't look great, but there's a reason for it that we know about, and actually we know why, and we know that we could fix it. We can't always fix things, but we do look at the past, but we can't let the past decide what we do in the future.
Thank you. By the way, Dahe, it was her question on the Facebook forum that initiated this whole evening. So if anyone deserves to get a commission out of it, it is you. We've got time for a couple more questions. We have one here, Emma. Oh, and with one there.
Hi, I'm Adrian Katz-Kennedy. I was wondering what your advice was for trying to straddle the balance between being distinctive but also marketable or relevant, or is it just a numbers game, or how does that sort of?
I think you can splice it in different ways. So if you take the vinegar example, you're not thinking vinegar's trendy, so I'm going to pitch another vinegar book. But you're thinking, okay, yes, a distinctive single ingredient book. So you sort of riff in your mind laterally across trends. So bold single ingredient books are working, or okay, veganism is working. So be sort of smart about it's finding that cross section of things that have in some associated way track record, but you're finding a fresh angle or a new way in, or an iteration that takes it further, or is a lateral jump. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It does. I just have to. Yes.
Hi, I'm Emma Richloff. I was going to ask actually as an extension of what you were saying about book sales and things. How much do the bookshops actually play a part sort of actively? Do you ever have meetings with them in terms of, and would they say, we actually, you know, because I went into Waterstones the other day and I had a few hours to kill, and I was quite overwhelmed actually just how many books there were, and I was thinking how, so many books coming out each year, but actually how do you get them on that table? And I don't know how much is that sort of the process.
So at the point of the initial creative discussion, when you have an idea and we're considering it, we don't actively involve retailers in a formal way at that point. However, for example, Waterstones, there is this amazing woman called Bea who looks after all of their food and drink buying, and she's like super cool and great and a lot of fun. And when I can't go to Bea every time, but she makes the food and drink decisions for the whole of Waterstones, so she's like super important. And from time to time, when I can, without being irritating to various points, I have to be careful too. I might say, hey, I'm thinking about this, or I've been talking to this person, have you heard of it? So sometimes they can play a part before a book is ever acquired. Yeah. Otherwise, it only hits it sort of during the selling process. So that's much further down the line. So it's kind of about 6 months out, generally speaking. I mean, throughout the year, we have teams of people who are regularly pitching to every single retailer in existence.
Yes, you pitch that. Yeah, because I was just thinking for you, people who are publishing books and haven't. Could that work against them? Or could it be that you publish a book and a retailer just ultimately says no?
100%.
I don't even want
happens
it
all the time. So in recent years, for example, I'm sure you've noticed, like supermarkets have become really, really important. Okay, and so like back in the day, supermarkets were not even considered by publishers, and then it became a thing that was mostly kind of about mass market fiction, and kind of like the super obvious nonfiction bestsellers, really famous biographies and stuff. Then they became huge and really started buying cookbooks, and for certain titles and certain established authors, they could represent up to 1/3 of the sales of anyone's book. So, and that, is huge, right? So, and that just wouldn't have existed maybe 10 years ago. Right now, they are all scaling back. And, it's making us very sad because they are a really good showcase for books, even if people then go and buy them on Amazon or whatever, to have that visibility in an everyday environment, especially as there are fewer and fewer actual bookstores all the time. So we are trying to maintain our kind of shelf space, if you like. All publishers will be doing this for those sorts of retailers all the time. But at the end of the day, kind of at the moment, Tesco, say, who sell a lot of cookbooks, have done, might only take 10 cookbooks at any one time. And, one of them's going to be Jamie and one's going to be Nigella. And that means that the opportunities for anyone who isn't like a megastar are slim. Maybe it'll be 3 or 4 books a year that are kind of debuts or smaller scale titles.
Given a chance.
Yeah.
And that is our last question. Can you please pounce on our panelists separately? Because I said that we finished now, and you know how I like to be in control.
He's so strict. There is more drink. drink stuff, more booze. So please help yourself to another drink. You can go out on the terrace as well if you like.
And if you enjoyed our panelists, what they shared with you, please give them a final round of applause.